Hi guys, my name is Varadante, and welcome back to The Second Witness, horror game character development. Now, this is what we kind of ended up with in the previous video, only I spent some time on the retopology of pretty much everything. So I was working with a very heavy assistance from Quad Remesher plugin, add-on. And yeah, it was actually a pretty cool process. It was quite different from the first witness, where I pretty much somewhere I used Quad Remesher and just used whatever it gave me, and somewhere I just totally started from scratch. Like for instance on the clothing, I totally did the remesh on my own. In this case, I always used Quad Remesher, but I also did pretty heavy manual retopology in many areas. Like in the dress, I solved a lot of the issues in here. Also, I remeshed it from the Sculpt version, so... Oh, by the way, the eyeballs I put in from the first witness, so they're literally these eyeballs, which is the point. All witnesses will have these specific eyes. But yeah, in our original sketch, the dress was this pretty... that body. The sketch was pretty, like, thick kind of thing, because when you sculpt sketch, you do it this way, you know, to avoid problems with thin walls. And so Quad Remesher totally did a great job on this, by the way. So if I just hit remesh with like, I don't know, like 1500 quad count, 10% adaptation, adaptive size. And yeah, we can use symmetry, although I didn't use symmetry pretty much on anything in here because our sculpt was already non-symmetrical, even with the wrinkles on the dress, for instance. And so yeah, we get this kind of result. You see it's like this thick dress, pretty much the same thickness as the sculpt was. Now, I really like the way Remesher works. It's really good, especially with this 10% adaptive size. It's just so good in terms of it's really low poly enough. I want it to be pretty low poly, so it's not even LOD 0, like the closest level of detail. It's LOD 1, like a bit further away. So definitely not the cutscene level of detail. And yeah, from this, it's pretty easy to, you know, get into it and introduce some changes, like manual changes with this topology, like for instance, introducing a much more solid edge loop around the color and like the sleeve areas or whatever. Would you call this a sleeve? One big problem of Quad Remesher that people knew about since like the day it was introduced in ZBrush is spirals, is this big cancer of Quad Remesher. I swear to God, there's somewhere a like corporate version of Quad Remesher available to like big corporations, and they totally just hit one button and get like perfect Pixar standard loops everywhere. Everything is perfect with that version of Quad Remesher. And these things, like if I'll try to select the loop right now, surprisingly, this is actually a proper loop. 9 times out of 10, it will do this. So you see the loop starts here, it continues here, and then it just keeps going in the spiral. And you're lucky if it ends pretty fast. So sometimes you need to kind of cut into it, like create a triangle somewhere to stop it, and then, you know, fix it to make it not a spiral. So that's like one big problem of Quad Remesher. Not to mention that if you work in like non-symmetrical topology, a lot of the times like you have like this extra loop in here and there's no like, there's extra loop this way, so they're like pretty different. And I ended up pretty much still having them. But yeah, these loops, this is one thing that's like the biggest issue when you're working with Quad Remesher, something to fix. Although, honestly, again, as I keep saying, and there are still people in the comments that tell me like, this is totally like a lame level of working, dude, like, I don't care, okay? And guess what? Most people also don't care. This will work, and it will work the way I want it to work, and I don't care the way you guys do it in the industry. How about that? How about there's free format 2-dimensional artists, and now we have free format 3-dimensional artists, and maybe even free format game developers. We'll see about that. So yeah, that's my approach generally, like my philosophy, like no hard feelings or anything, of course. I'm just saying that this is the way I'm going with it. Like I tried the first witness in the Unreal Engine, it works super awesome. Like I love it, the way I made it, and it looks great. So I see no problem with that at all. I didn't spend a lot of time on that character, even though it looks like it was a lot of time on the channel, but that's because I was just taking huge breaks between videos and everything. But yeah, all of this, like, I did all the retopology last night. That's how it is. The biggest retopology I did on the dress, but also, of course, on the face. The face was huge. And generally, the body was very interesting. Another aspect of working with Quad Remesher, I was taking advantage heavily of this thing. It's called Use Vertex Color. And in here, you can define quad density. So 0.5 will be like the cyan color. And the more like heavier density you get, the more red you paint with. So pretty much this is my guidance for the details. And yeah, this was a big deal. A lot of times I was remeshing, seeing it doesn't quite work, and doing it again and again. So about 8,000 it was. So if we give it a try right now, that will probably be really close to the raw topology that I got from Quad Remesher last night. And this is how I adapted it. Yeah, it looks very much similar, like even the same patterns of polygons on the hands. So yeah, you can see on the face I did a whole lot of work. And here it looks like this, which is pretty good, honestly. Obviously some loops are not perfect for like cinematic animation or something like that. This is not the way it works, but in here I did a lot of changes, you know, added extra details with like these all like bumps and everything, the way we have in our concept right here. So yeah, all of that was pretty cool to add. Also actually added a hole in the mouth. So yeah, the original topologies just had whatever we had in the sculpt. And here I introduced deeper holes for our eyeballs, as well as this kind of a mouth. She won't be talking, but I decided to introduce actual like some kind of hint on the hole in the mouth, because it's, you know, it's kind of there in the concept as well. So yeah, I think it's a pretty good spread of detail all over the place. I made sure to also paint a lot of red with that vertex color on the fingers to get enough detail. So you can see this square of a polygon is definitely a lot smaller than like here, and a lot smaller than here. All of that is just defined by that vertex color. So if I would have the same color, this size would be here, and it would be like barely a square kind of dissection shape. So you better pay attention to that if you use it. One last thing I would add is probably some kind of hint on the actual ear topology. That's for this geometry base of the actual body. But here's another cool thing. I made two versions of the dress. One of them is like this, which is, it already has like a thickness modifier applied to it, but generally it's like this thin dress. It's pretty good. Could go right into the game, you know, with this topology. It's pretty decent, I think. Even kind of simulation ready. I haven't really tried that all that much in terms of like in-game physics, but I'm definitely planning to introduce that at least like on the bottom half of the dress, to introduce like so it would be bouncing around. That would be pretty awesome. Especially in Unreal Engine 5, they have much better simulation ways. But then I also made this version of the dress. This is like the normal pose of the dress without any stretching or anything like that. And we need to make it into this shape. And there's like big differences between these two dresses. It's actually completely different topology. In here, we just have normal topology to define this shape of the stretched dress. But this, like, this amount of polygons in here is way more than all, like, this few squished polygons over there. So that's really the huge difference, and something I mentioned in the previous episodes. Why I did that is because we want, right now, to work with this dress, introduce UV unwrapping on it, and then stretch it using the cloth brush. And the cool thing about the cloth brush and using it for, pulling the cloth somewhere is that it will actually let me introduce the real surface retention, I guess that's the way to put it. I won't be losing the surface like in the original topology. The surface of the cloth in here, it just disappeared, like someone just ate it away. While if we want to show the stretching, there should be a lot of the surface wrinkled up. And I could sculpt in a little bit of the wrinkles to kind of show it that there's wrinkles, that there's stretching, but it wouldn't be even close to the actual amount of surface that we need to show wrinkled up. It will be a very different look. All this topology plus the somewhat simulation of physics with the cloth brush, although I'm seeing it's gonna be kind of tough to do it as I'm just trying it. This is not doing so good, so I'll definitely need to fiddle around with the settings. Right now, I'll do the UV unwrapping, try to position the cloth. And one last thing before we start, I want to mention the shoes. I just quickly remeshed them with super low settings, I don't know, 300 or maybe 150. I even tried polygons per each with that 10% adaptive size, which really made Quad Remesher working with this small amount of polygons really getting close to something that, you may have gotten if you would do it yourself, actually. So looking pretty good. As a base, I really like the way this topology looks. So there's that on the shoes, and one last thing is the hair. It's super low detail. This was literally just Quad Remesher's result with super low settings, probably also 150, and then I never touched it. The point is, I'll probably use some kind of curves or maybe planes. I'll see cards. There are different types to show hair, but it won't be one solid piece. We need to show, all this fluffy, kind of gray pale kind of hair of an old lady or Boris Johnson kind of thing, It's always very vague. It's not any kind of styling of the hair going on with some kind of hair product. It's always just fluffy and lame with these no color kind of things. So that's what I really want to show. And I think it's gonna be a pretty fresh look for something to see in a game, So yeah, these are my thoughts on that. Let's go ahead and do the dress in a proper position. Yeah, this angle-based method is definitely a better thing in this situation. I don't know exactly what its nature is, but it's probably best to use it when you're unwrapping clothing, maybe? Okay, that's looking quite realistic, I think, if the clothing just does that. And in here as well, that's usually the way clothing does anyway, because people are not perfectly rectangular. And yeah, we have this tapering on the shape of it, in here as well a little bit. And that's where it's coming from. It's totally reasonable to have this kind of unwrapping, I think. So yeah, now we have all the surface of the texture baked in here. And when we'll stretch it, or compress it, drag it downwards, it will save all of that. And it's gonna be awesome. I'm gonna duplicate it and hide that version. And with this one, let's go ahead and give it a try. I'll really need to adjust some settings. Also, that's more fun. What a great reference. So it seemed to me during the process that this parameter called soft body plasticity was really something that helped me stretch the cloth in here. Because as I said, we do need to save a lot of surface in here, like to keep the actual texture of the pattern of the cloth. We'll have some kind of flowers or whatever. We need all of them to be in here the way they would be on the non-stretched version, but we still need to stretch this area because this is literally a stretched dress. It's stretched downwards, so we need to be doing that. And it seemed to be pretty hard to do it at first, but then I used 0.5 on the soft body plasticity. It was at 0 at first, and it seemed to work better, like I started actually stretching well. But right now as I'm trying, I again can't really see a lot of difference between using any soft body plasticity and not using it at all. It's kind of like still stretching, you know? So I'm not 100% on that. I'll keep it at 0.5. And also toning down this gray circle of the simulation radius around the brush. It's a pretty good idea when you're working on a dress where mostly it needs to stay in place. If it was like 2.5, if I would be dragging here, I would be affecting a lot of surface around, even though the brush, the orange brush, is pretty small. And with 1, I can just, you know, move certain things around and just introduce the immediate wrinkles next to it, and that's it. That's pretty cool, very controllable. Now, we're at this level here. I kind of stretched it, but I'm in a bit of a dead end here. I guess, like these super big wrinkles, they're way too big. They look like she's a doll because these wrinkles are so giant. It's like she's a very tiny person or something. So in order to work with this, we need to subdivide, and that's where we'll actually run into some limitations of Blender. I'll be using not subdivision surface, but multi-resolution, because I need all these lower levels as well for different levels of detail and everything. So I'll subdivide, and immediately we are losing some stuff. So we can no longer see the texture, and we can no longer see the thickness of the cloth with solidify, because it's just not gonna be showing up in the sculpting mode. In here, if we switch to the subdivided mode, it's totally gonna work, but when you sculpt, it's gonna be just gray. Not a big deal. Since we still have, I believe, solidify going only inwards, so the outer surface will look exactly the same. So cool. Just gotta keep in mind that, you know, some of the clothing needs to go downwards, so a little bit of space in here is a good idea. Now, I subdivided, which means, as I mentioned in the process of the first witness, this is the only way that I know of to control the size of the wrinkles, like the sort of like the thickness of the cloth simulation in Blender here with this cloth brush. Because right now you're gonna notice we're getting much more, you know, dress-like cloth wrinkles. They're much smaller and look much better. Before that it was like super thick leather. Like, look at these giant wrinkles. It's like taken from an ass of some biker. Meaning his pants, not his actual ass. But yeah, now I can really bring it in. Bring that little detail out and all that. It will actually now work and introduce much smaller wrinkles in here. And something, you know, a bit more defined. Can I use like topology mode? Like topology, yeah, I can. So now, yeah, I can drag this part of the wrinkle without affecting that one. So actually I'll be able to push them closer to each other, because before that they all kept having this distance between them, because when I grab one of them, another one moves with them. But if right now, if I use like a smaller radius, when it won't, you know, actually reach the wrinkles all the way through the topology, I will be able to push only one of them. Just like that. Beautiful. Oh yeah, now it looks very different. Like, it looks like what we actually meant. Like, the dress is stretched. It looks a lot more aggressive and defined. Noticeable. Before that, it was like, well, she is like that, And she's wearing a dress customly tailored for her hole. And this now looks like something happened. So something serious happened, and it's attracting a whole lot of attention to it. I can't let go of the thought that maybe I would end up with much more fitting wrinkles if I would subdivide a bit earlier before stretching all the way downwards and introducing this giant fold. Because maybe I would instead have like 3 smaller folds instead of 2 big folds. Now I can kind of push them around, but they are still gonna be the 2 folds. Just kind of crumbled a little bit, which is not ideal. I don't even know if I can kind of fix it. And smoothing is totally ruining any kind of surface retention. I do still have that UV unwrapped version without any stretching applied, so we could redo it. I'll probably go ahead and do it. What the hell? Yeah, so this, and let's just probably go ahead and introduce our multi-resolution subdivision in here right away. And at first, I'll be moving on the first level. Why I start with the first level is because it's just kind of easier. You have less chance into introducing some very strong, weird wrinkles that you really don't need. But as I'm trying it, I think like we're immediately running into the issue of having smaller amount of much bigger folds, and I don't like it. Let's just switch to this then. We have like a smaller radius of simulation, the gray circle around our brush. So it's gonna be pretty controllable anyway. Yeah, also I'm using this sphere fall off. It's rarely useful, because usually it's like very noticeable where that sphere ends, you know, when you're trying to drag something. But in this case, it's a good example of an exception from that rule, because this is a simulation brush, so any kind of sharp edge that the sphere would have, the simulations will take care of that. And generally the sphere kind of fall off is actually pretty good for introducing this influence. Yeah, I think I'm liking this level of detail. This is about right for the stretching of this kind of basic everyday dress, you know, it's not like silk. If it would be silk, I would go with like this kind of simulations, and that would be fancy. So yeah, we're gonna have to introduce this really big stretch here, and also push it under this thing. I really like it when the bits of this flesh are hanging over the dress. That's something I really want to show, the way it actually kind of was in the concept as well in there. So I'm totally going for that here. Yeah, I'm definitely liking these wrinkles a lot more. One thing though, there's this boundary brush that's actually really cool if you use it right. It lets you just grab just the edge. And if you use this mode of like boundary fall off of being just brush radius, that won't be like, if you don't use it, it will literally grab all of the highlighted yellow thing and move it all together. It's good for like the edge of the dress or something if you want to like wrap it around or something. But in this case, we just want to grab a certain part of it and move it, you know? So what I wanted to do is just that it's like a little bit of a problem with just grabbing things with a brush. You always end up like curving inwards a little bit on the surface next to these edges. And the cloth usually goes kind of the other way around. So we need to, you know, unfold it a little bit in some places. Like, I feel like it's really asking to do that here. But we definitely need a sharp fall off in this case to really improve it. I don't know though how exactly to affect it right now. I feel like just going back to our cloth brush at the moment. So yeah, I'll try to make it like really look like a stretch, meaning whatever is holding to like onto the cloth, it will be exactly where it's stretching over, because that's the way stretching works, you know. It's not gonna be like loose in here, it will be pretty tight around these objects, just like that, very tucked in. I like how this is sort of a reoccurring theme in both witnesses, with like the first witness being an old man that really has his fly open completely and all this, his front back really going downwards into that area, and then here as well, it's like stretched downwards like all the way, you know, really open in front of you, whether you want that or not. So this reoccurring theme of unwanted intimacy manifesting in this kind of exposing. Let's try introducing bigger radius of the simulation and see what can happen. Like all this extra wrinkling can be really cool. I was thinking trying the plane mode. How far is it gonna... So it's just still the radius of the brush, but it's just the line. I think it will be pretty useful here. Because I keep dragging like the one point and it's obvious. It's nice to introduce some wrinkles over this like belt area or waistline kind of thing. But overall, like, it's not a mode, like this plane mode is not the best to use at all times. Mostly is best to use just radial. Now we'll see if this pinch perpendicular brush or mode will actually be useful. Yeah, that looks like crap. Man, that's the fall off you have? That's like with sharp. What? Whoa. Maybe plain will improve things. No, it did not. Did not improve things. I wonder if I use like global, which means whenever I make a brush stroke anywhere, the whole dress will be simulating, reacting to that movement. And like I use grab and I turn on collision. Will it actually collide with the body? Like, no? Whoa! That's dope. I think it's pretty safe to use the, what is it called, the crease brush? Just make sure it has good pinch and not too strong of a strength. Generally, you do this going as sharp as you can, you know, so we can... Oh, it's already sharper. And generally, this brush is like a spiky draw brush, like basic brush that goes inwards, but also applies some pinching at the same time. But like in our case, it's like not enough. So what we do is we also go ahead and use pinch on top to introduce stronger folding in here, this proper shape, proper profile of the fold. Yeah, that kind of look. And really, if you just want a more pinching with just this crease brush, what you do is you, as I said, make the strength smaller, like 0.5, while having maximum pinch. And just go lightly, but several times. That way you'll get more pinching each time, with a smaller amount of actually pushing down. It's pretty good. Okay, let's inflate a little bit in here, if it's possible, I don't know. Because we definitely have some very weird pinching in there. So I wonder what this looks like on a small subdivision level. Right, so I wasn't doing any of this in the first level at all, so we need to apply base. And that's what it will look like on a like bigger distance. And as we get closer in the game, it switches to this. Pretty cool. So I just realized cloth folds, they are not really like fat folds on the Flash. They don't go just like this. They sort of go like this, you know? There's extra space. They shouldn't look like fat folds. So what I'm doing is I'm using blob holding control, so reverse blobbing. It would be doing like this kind of thing, like creating a whole blob, like a cheese hole, I guess. But if it's a long thing, it will kind of introduce the same fix for these fat folds that would turn them into the actual cloth folds. Generally, maybe it's a really good brush for creating this kind of folds on the cloth at any point. Oh my god, why is it so stretchy? Do I still have... No, I don't have soft body plasticity. So yeah, I guess that'll be it for this episode of addressing the sculpting of clothing in Blender. So that's how I think is best to approach it, in terms of first you sculpt your dress in the default position without any stretchings, in case you're planning for some stretchings. Then you do the retopology, you apply UV mapping, and then you start positioning it into the, like, this kind of pose that you want, only using like cloth simulation brushes or cloth simulation. And yeah, this way we get still all of this surface in here to apply some kind of, you know, flowery pattern for the grandma dress in here, and it will perfectly lay into all of these folds just right, being a bit stretched in here as they should be, you know. So it will look awesome, it will support the tension, the idea of the stretched clothing, and everything will look pretty awesome. Now you guys can go ahead and ask me in the comments, why am I not using Marvelous Designer? You can go ahead and buy me one if you want to. But yeah, I really don't think that these characters need the actual Marvelous Designer simulations. Those look too fancy and clean, and in here we need kind of like the old, worn, kind of sweaty, I don't know, gross looking outfits. So just these more of a higher plasticity and higher stickiness kind of simulations and controlled shaping is a better approach here to make the clothing look, you know, like it's not just perfectly just manufactured and ideal from some fashion model. I feel like this will work pretty well anyway. But yeah, for now, this is it. Tell me guys what you think. In the next episode, we'll be doing sculpting on the face, like generally on the body mesh. So it'll be the face, the whole, maybe some extra details on these awesome arms and some veins on the legs. We'll see about that. But for now, this is it. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye! Oh man, I can't wait to, you know, finish this second witness and then put both of them next to each other in Unreal Engine and compare, like, do they actually look similar? Because I feel like I'm, like, doing a lot of better decisions with this model comparing to the first one, so it may have, like, a very different look to it. So that's gonna be fun to see.